Yep.
Goal is to make it past 5 minutes before laughing. So that's my personal goal anyways. Oh, I have to put
Not
this
going to happen.
I think it's possible. It's possible. Here we go. It's not going to be on the whole time. I promise. I promise. I won't be able to handle it. Okay, here we go. Salwete. I am your host, Stella, and this is Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast, episode 192 for June MMXX. Batgirl the Oracle is brought to you by the Batman Universe, as well as Listen to the Prophets, a Deep Space Nine podcast. And Batgirl the Oracle is also brought to you by MileHighComics.com, your new and collectible comic book store. Mile High Comics has an inventory of over 5 million comics from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern age, and over 100,000 trade paperbacks. If you're not into the vintage stock, Mile High Comics also has a subscription service called the New Issue Comics Express, offering a discounted price for comics ready to hit the shelves. So if you're looking for vintage back issues or a great modern subscription service, be sure to check out milehighcomics.com. Well, this is weird because you can see us. I decided to try something new. We're in these unprecedented times. And so I thought, let's do something special. And I'm here to lead you through questions that everyone wants to know, like if a baby Yoda makes a poo and the Mandalorian is not there, who cleans it up? But with me today are, yes, I know. Okay, well, we've got Let's Go Ladies First. She is, as I said, a Twitter influencer, but even better about her is that you can throw her under the bus, accuse her of things, be hostile to her on Twitter. She doesn't respond. You can call her Carolyn. I call her Professor Polytetrafluoroethylene. Welcome.
You've never called me that, but okay. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you on. And above me, as you see him, is the rival to my affections for Harold. It's Donovan Morgan Grant.
This is the first and last time I'm ever doing this.
Well, I'll take your word for that. That means I can get Shag on to do the rest of the Cassandra Cain run.
Oh, never mind. Forget
okay.
That.
Yeah, so I thought this could be fun, partially because Carolyn actually threatened me last month that if I didn't catch up on Clone Wars, that I was not allowed to record an episode, and Donovan was all on that, like they could do it together, and I thought that's not going to happen. But
okay, that is true. That is true.
I did catch up. It was strange because, of course, I threaten other people and tell them to do things, but coming at me, it felt very uncomfortable. But here we are. I thought... But I thought, why not bring these two wonderful people on and just have a fun little first time ever Batgirl the Oracle video podcast. If you're not watching this, you might be listening to it. So with the watching, it's going to be bare bones. There won't be any music because I don't need YouTube coming after me. I'll say there's a next segment coming on, but you won't hear it. But you can go to wherever you normally download and you'll get the full thing with intros and things like that. But I want to first talk to you guys because I think I've talked to you both when the pandemic started and we just talked about how our lives were different. And I think we could constantly do that, but I thought we could transition and as an intro do what sorts of things are you doing that is helping you find your joy coming from Shag. So I call this new segment Shag's Mac and Cheese of Comfort and Joy. So what sorts of things are bringing you comfort and joy in these weird times? Carolyn, why don't you go first? She's got her thinking face on.
Well, now you can see my thinking face.
Yes.
Okay, comfort and joy. Okay. I like to, well, part of it is I still have a routine because even though my semester ended, I'm teaching a session of summer school. So I still kind of have class, which is kind of giving me more of a structure on weekdays. I try to make sure to exercise every day and usually outside, but I also do yoga and meditate. And I like to cook. So I'm trying to take more time with that because I have more flexible time to do that. We're catching up on movies. I've read some good books, that kind of thing.
Dawn, how about you? What's your comfort and joy?
Macaroni and cheese. I don't like that you labeled Shag's name over it. No, I have been maintaining the last 2 months. I've been furloughed. I think the most consistent thing that I've been doing is just working out at home. It's helped me kind of stay consistent because it helps me kind of experiment with the dumbbells I have and kind of like, kind of push myself in ways in which I've been comfortable not pushing myself. I've been trying to go outside, although it's been like raining constantly here in Nashville. But I think working out has been the most consistent way I've been productive. I've not read as much as I really thought I was going to, except for like, unless it's like an article for DC Universe. And there's not been an uptick in podcasts necessarily, but I think exercise, trying to do more push-ups than I usually can do and going outside has been the most productive way I've found my joy. So, yes.
Yeah.
So the Terminator 2 approach.
Yeah, I need to be as strong and swole as Linda Hamilton. That's my goal.
Oh, man. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, getting out there, I start to cycle a lot more. And my brother does like 70 to 80 miles, and he'll text me his updates because he's training for a half Ironman. And so I'm definitely not up there, but maybe my goal will be like half of that or something. But yeah, definitely reading, as you all know. And I actually just finished last night a marathon of playing all of the Uncharted games. So PlayStation had recently put out for free, because of all of this stuff, 1, 2, and 3, the collection on PS4. And then I already had number 4 and then the Lost Legacy. So I just finished Lost Legacy. So that was a lot of fun. And I'm just preparing myself emotionally for when The Last of Us Part 2 comes out, because that will not be joyful. Though I'll be really excited to play it. But yeah, I'm just getting ready for that. So yeah, so I think that's just the message, is that, Shag's message of find your joy always was, I think, applicable to comics. That's what he always tried to tell us. But I think it's very true now with everything. And I was even telling my students to like find some way that you can get some bit of joy out there, because otherwise it's just like you can't handle it. The other thing we have to talk about, which Dawn has no interest in at all, I did have an Ahsoka pop. Now she's too far away. I'll have to go back there and find her. But the Clone Wars ended. They brought back a 7th season, right? 7th. And they had 12 episodes. And I was late to the game. I think secretly I was just trying to draw it out as long as possible before it would end. But I finally watched the last episode. And so, Carolyn, what is your impression on this season overall? And were you happy with how it ended? I know the beginning, you can talk about that. We discussed that a bit, but just your thoughts on bringing it back and how it turned out.
I think it was a good idea to bring it back. I think Disney Plus was the right venue to do it. I mean, people are still certainly invested in the Skywalker saga. I think we know that. But it felt unfinished when it ended, because they had more episodes. And a couple of the ones that were begun but unfinished turned out to be the first ones of this this season, sorry. I found there were 12. I found the first 2/3 of them not so interesting, which was kind of a bummer. The first ones were just about the clones, which, all respect to D. Bradley Baker, who does every voice of every clone and makes them sound different and gives them all personality. That's amazing. But it was just, to me, felt like an awful lot of guys shooting and yelling. Then there was this second arc which is not my thing. Some people like it, that's fine. The second one was about Ahsoka, and she just sort of has this side adventure with these 2 women, these sisters. And that's fine, because they're trying to just not give you exactly what you want right away, which is to get back into the timeline proper that's familiar to you. And that's what the last 4 episodes were. So these last 4 episodes are basically what everybody's waited all these years for, which is, it's not just the journey. This is what I appreciated about it, was it's not just the journey of Ahsoka from annoying little Padawan with a lot to learn through becoming a Jedi to here, but it's also how the Clone Wars finally meets up with Anakin and Obi-Wan going to rescue the Chancellor from Dooku, and Order 66, and what the Jedi Council is doing at that time. They clearly took care to make it cinematic. in look and in score. But these last 4 episodes, the ones that I really liked, were more, they not only tied up the stories of Ahsoka and Rex, but they also tied everything in with all the prequel movies and everything that happens up to the fall of Darth Vader. So I totally recommend it. And even honestly, if you never watched any Clone Wars, you can still watch these last 4 episodes and you'll basically get what's going on because you know most of the characters. So yeah, I'm glad that they did it. I'm glad I saw it.
Same.
I assume you.
Yeah, I think I would say everything that you said. It was almost like a gimmick because I think the real reason everyone wanted it was because of Ahsoka. And you may not have liked Ahsoka at the beginning of Clone Wars, but I think as she's developed, you really get to be a fan of her. And I think part of the reason that Rebels is so great is like waiting for Ahsoka to appear when she does, and everyone's super excited for Ahsoka coming into Mandalorian. So I was just waiting for Ahsoka to appear, and when she finally did, the storyline was okay with that, but it was just all a preface to this final bit with the Mandalorian on Mandalore and Darth Maul reappearing. And yeah, cinematic, wonderful fight sequences. I even watched the behind the scenes because they did mocap for it, motion capture, just like for video games. And so they actually had Ray Park back as Darth Maul. And so that was just great that it was.
Why hasn't he? How could he not have aged though? That's not right.
It's just one of those people, I guess. The elixir of youth runs through his veins. Yeah. But just having, I think that was just such respect there is, having his actual body being the body that they captured. And Rex, having that. And episode 4 was just so emotional too, because of the ending where she has that moment with Rex. She removes his helmet. They talk about soldiers and that they're ready to die, and she said they might be ready to die, but I'm not going to be the one to kill them. And then the graveyard, like, it was an emotional ride. If I didn't know that Ahsoka was going to make it out, I would have been really in a frenzy. I think I was already like clenched because it was just really intense, and I thought, oh gosh, what's going to happen? But yeah, it was great. Even the droids at the end and doing their heroic duties. So I think while the beginning was a bit slow and it's not necessarily what we were looking for, I think the end, absolutely, those last 4 episodes makes up for it. And I recommend watching the Clone Wars from the beginning, but like you said, if you just want a good idea of what it is, watching those last 4.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the Clone Wars is uneven. The whole, the 7 seasons of it is uneven.
Yeah.
I would recommend it too, but if you wanted to see what all the fuss is about, you could watch these last 4 episodes and consider them sort of episode 2.5, because they have that kind of scope. They slot in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith and are arguably better than 2.5 of the prequel movies.
Oh man, yeah.
I said it.
I heard you say it. Are you a fan of General Grievous, by the way? Have we ever talked about him?
Sure. I mean, who wouldn't love it?
Oh gosh. Well, I was on a Star Wars podcast as a guest, and I did this quiz that the guy was giving, Ryan Daly, and I made mention that General Grievous is cool, and then he was like, oh gosh, you're gonna get kicked out of the Star Wars community. I thought, what's wrong with General Grievous? He takes lightsabers from all the Jedi that he's slain. I think he's amazing.
Stella, Harry loves General Grievous.
See, that's why Harold and I are meant to be. Well, this isn't the Star Wars podcast, even though every time Carolyn comes on, we always find a way to talk about it.
I know.
But we are going to talk about some random story. I guess one of the reviews that we're going to do is random, and then the other one is Cascade. So we'll start with the random ones. Azrael has returned in my list on Excel of Barbara popping up in it. So we're going to cover a 4-issue arc and we kind of get dropped down in the middle of things. I actually can't remember the last time I covered an Azrael issue, so this is 72. It's been a while. But I want to give you some background on what's going to happen in this particular story, and then Carolyn's going to do the first two plot synopses. I'll do the last two, and then we'll chat about it, and then Donovan will be up later on with his precious Cassandra Cain. So there's this character named the Prophet, and he is also known as Jeremiah Tompkins, who happens to be the younger brother of Dr. Leslie Tompkins. This was a shock to me. I didn't know she had any siblings, but there we go. He was a doctor and a missionary in Saudi Arabia, and during that time, he compiled a list of people that he considered evildoers, as a missionary does, of course. He traveled to the Middle East in October, where Leslie actually lost track of him, and she asked John Paul to look for him. She has a pretty good relationship with John Paul, which we'll see in the later issues, kind of this internal debate that John Paul goes through because of Leslie. Batman is aware of the mission, so he's kind of keeping track as well. And then the faux Azrael, or the imposter, he'll go by either name. He actually comes from an Asian sect of the Order of Saint Dumas in Shanghai, so he kind of appears. Jeremiah believes that the imposter's presence is a sign of his salvation. And then Jeremiah, also known as Jerry, speculates that the imposter is an agent of good and he has come to the desert to fight evil. So that's kind of just a background of what's happening. I think that's enough to like give you some understanding of what's going on, because I apologize to YouTube for kind of just dropping us in there. I mean,
yeah, you know when this summary would have been useful? Like a week ago.
Whoa, ma'am. I dropped that in a couple days ago. I apologize. Heavens above, man. Okay, well, Professor Polytetra fluoroethylene, you are up.
All right. So everything you just said, I kind of had to look up because I started reading it. I didn't really know what was happening. So what she was just talking about starts 2 issues before. So number 72, where we start, is Prophet Part 3, Hell It Back. January 2001 by Denny O'Neil, pencils by Sergio Cariello, inks by James Pasco, colors by Rob Rowe. The cover is like Jeremiah Tompkins looking kind of Jesus-y, but a little demonic and long-nailed, and Azrael's floating head is in the background, and there's some like geometrically colored shapes. Okay, so the Azrael from the Asian sect of the Order of Saint Dumas in Shanghai. So he's like an Azrael, but he's not our Azrael. So since you gave me the choice between faux Azrael and imposter, I'll go with faux Azrael. So our Azrael, John Paul Valley, takes advantage of faux Azrael's hesitation in the first panel of this issue to jump out the window and run. So faux Azrael catches up with Jean Paul and saves him from landmines and lets him go. And then he sets off a landmine to make it sound like Jean Paul was killed. Jeremiah, Leslie's brother, wants to rid the world of evildoers and all that, and Leslie asks Jean Paul to bring him home. Jeremiah heard the explosion and congratulates faux Azrael. Meanwhile, in Gotham City, Batman sneaks up on Oracle and asks if she's heard anything from Jean Paul in Saudi Arabia. Batman is worried that Jean Paul is both naive and has also gone through so much trauma that he could just turn into the killing machine he was trained to be. P.S. says Batman, I have some experience with childhood trauma. As if any of us forgot about that. So Jeremiah tells faux Azrael that they are leaving the Middle East in order to deal with the many wicked people on this wicked earth, and faux Azrael will be his instrument of vengeance. Jeremiah tells faux Azrael the stolen medical supplies that they have were meant for a children's hospital, but since the supplies are better served as bait for evildoers, he decides the children will have to wait because he's terrible. Meanwhile, this general, whose name is Magog, not to be confused with the DC Universe's Magog, General Magog becomes concerned, or maybe it is supposed to be, I don't know. General Magog is concerned that this officer Worley is in trouble since neither he nor Jean Paul have returned. Magog and a couple of his men find Worley's Jeep, then they go to Jeremiah's base where they find traces of blood but no bodies. Magog figures Jean Paul is still alive since he's a great warrior, and he respects him, but if they meet again, Magog will not extend him any more courtesies. So Jeremiah and faux Azrael arrive in Legostan, which I guess is generic DC fictional Middle Eastern country, where a band of soldiers stop a truck that is transporting refugees across a border in the mountains. The soldiers begin to open fire on the refugees, but faux Azrael jumps in, to kill the soldiers. Jeremiah is pleased. And a refugee asks Jeremiah for any medical supplies that could help his injured daughter. But Jeremiah says he can't be bothered with things like that because he's terrible. So we see Faux Azrael kind of tilting his head, seemingly disgusted at this. Then Faux Azrael tells Jeremiah that he is Azrael. And Jeremiah says, great, you're the avenging angel sent by God to test me and help me redeem the world. And then Jeremiah has like a literal list of evildoers, and they're going to decide where their next crusade will be. Okay, meanwhile in Gotham City, Batman sneaks up on Oracle again. Oracle hands him some documents about Penguin's tax returns and says they haven't heard from Jean-Paul in a month. Then she tells him that the refugee that Jeremiah refused to help told the story to a doctor at a nearby clinic because he did go to get his daughter treated for this bullet wound. And he told this doctor about a man in a mask who killed people with a sword just a couple of days after they last heard from Jean-Paul. So they're both like, rrr, rrr. Okay, so that's the end of number 72. Then number 73, Losses Part 1, Homecoming, is the same creative team. This cover has a similar style as the last cover, but it's got like different parts with kind of traditional drawings of the characters and then other things like a bat logo and what I assume is Batman's brain is inside his head.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, right. And someone that I assume is Babs on the cover, but she looks really creepy and with an angle and proportions and color. We can talk about that later. Okay, Batman confronts Azrael in part 1 of this powerful 3-part story. Not really. Okay, so Azrael and Faux Azrael and Jeremiah burst into a clinic and terrorize someone named Marcy, who I can only assume is Babs's old best friend, Marcy. Just kidding. She knows Jeremiah. She calls him Jerry. She hopes he'll use his doctor skills there. She's sorry their relationship didn't work out. He says, yeah, well, but then you found Frank, who of course left you because of your foulness. He actually says foulness. Then this elderly patient comes in and Jeremiah is so mad to be interrupted, he knocks her over because he's terrible. He tells Faux Azrael to kill Marcy, which he does, along with 2 other guys. I would note here that often in real life, mass murderers kill their partner or former partner before killing others. And that most mass murderers are male, and most of those domestic partners are female. Jeremiah drags the elderly lady by her hair because he's terrible. He drags her outside the clinic so she can tell people about them, and then he tells Faux Azrael to set the clinic on fire. Oracle calls Batman and calls him boss, which, no. She tells him about the clinic. It was 18 miles from where the refugees were, and tells him about the elderly lady mentioning an avenging angel. Batman puts his head in his hands and recaps for us. It's Jean-Paul Valley, Azrael, programmed to be an assassin, and notes he could have put him away many years ago, but he didn't. Then he punches a punching bag off a chain because he's so strong and he's so upset and so manly. Oracle hopes that she and the boss are wrong. Meanwhile, our Jean-Paul is at the Order of St. Dumas. He's reading books. He read The Great Gatsby. Good for you, buddy. So we beat on, borne back ceaselessly into the past. He thanks Nomos, I guess that's how you say it, for rescuing him. He needs to get across the desert, so Nomos leads him to a hovercraft, which of course they have there. Nomos won't speak because since he left the Order, he doesn't know who he is, so he doesn't know how he should speak, which Jean-Paul notes is either very profound or very ridiculous, and literally says, and I'm quoting, "Thanks for everything. I hope you get an identity. Goodbye." So Batman visits Leslie, who quite reasonably questions his mental health, and he in turn says she sent Jean-Paul to get Jeremiah, and he's worried that he's killing people. She says Jeremiah worked in Lagostan. He was brilliant, but he was intense and he lacked compassion. She asks him to promise that he won't hurt either of them, and he just says, sorry. Batman does, that is. So Faux Azrael has killed some more people, and he and Jeremiah are scaring a drug dealer whom they leave alive to tell about them because they keep doing that. Jean-Paul arrives in Gotham and he calls Oracle, and Oracle says, the boss is blaming you for a lot of killings. Again, with this boss thing, no. He doesn't deny it, Jean-Paul, but he hangs up and he's annoyed that Batman is blaming him again, exclamation point. He goes to Bruce as Bruce in the Wayne building and asks what he wants. Bruce drops his millionaire Bruce smile and he says, I want you, Azrael. And then they have hot sex on the desk. No, that's not what happened.
I knew it.
I know, obviously, right? It ends, I want you, Azrael. So make of that what you will, dear reader.
It's true. Carolyn just wrote a slash fic.
It was a short one, but yeah.
It was a short one. Yeah, trigger warning, Donovan. Why doesn't Batman trust Azrael?
Yeah, I could have used that last night. I was reading that. I was like, oh, geez, this is the entire episode, isn't it?
Hey, man, that's why I brought on Professor P. Okay, here we go. 74, Losses Part 2, Accused. The cover date is March 2001, and same creative team. Bruce Wayne Jerk, as I'll call him, he's designed with a lazy eye, which reminds me of Donovan's lazy eye fetish. Donovan, do you remember how
What?
It was more than 5 minutes. Remember anytime the Mad Hatter popped up in New 52, he had a lazy eye and he had to point it out?
Do you remember what I gave those issues?
Very poor grades. But anyways, it just made me laugh when I saw that. He really does open up it's like page 1. So anyways, Bruce Wayne Jerk is about to tell John Paul that he knows he's been killing a bunch of people in the Middle East. But plot twist, he gives him a bunch of evidence that it can't possibly be him. Trusting Azrael actually doesn't come up in the list of evidence, I will like to say. Jean Paul tells Bruce of the imposter and Jeremiah Tompkins on the way to the manor. Bruce tells him it is up to John Paul whether he wants to go after the imposter, and Bruce will help him because he has an obligation to Jean Paul. In the cave, Bruce tells Jean Paul that they need to find Sister Lily, and get Jean Paul a new costume, which is interesting, but I'll talk about that later. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, a man who translated something important to Jerry's mission is killed by Jerry because, he don't want information to get out. At a hotel room, Jerry reads up on the Order of Saint Dumas and Lily. Jerry assumes that without her, the imposter will be free. So they need to get rid of her, and then the imposter can be under his control. She is every evil woman from the Bible combined. That was nice. They don't have Oracle, but they do have a phone that Lil-Hee actually gave the imposter. She is called up. She's disappointed that Jean Paul is dead, but tells the imposter to come to Gotham immediately. While all this is happening, Batman and Jean Paul visit Oracle, who has nice hair, Professor Allen, to see if she can pick up the trail of Lil-Hee, who surprisingly is in a swanky hotel in Gotham, and it's $40,000 a day, which is insane. Oracle later laughs at the men because they can't go vanquish evil until they get the right clothes. And this was actually really funny because I've been watching feminist frequency videos with Anita Sarkeesian, and she talked about this ad for Perfect Dark, I think it was called, and it's all sexualized, and this woman is like, what her greatest choice is, what does she wear? And then she made up a fake ad of what happened if a man did that, and then here it is. They didn't get the joke though, Batman and Jean Paul, they don't laugh, but it is funny. Jean Paul and Bruce discuss the costume and Leslie Tompkins because Jean Paul doesn't know if he wants to get back in the violence game. And I think this is all coming from, correct me if I'm wrong, Don, wasn't it in No Man's Land where he and Leslie had like several serious sit-down conversations about like his lifestyle and what he was doing, and so he kind of took that to heart from her?
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah, okay. So that's, just keep that in the back of your mind with a lot of the decisions that he goes through. Jean Paul wants to just talk to Lil-Hee, so he feels like he'll be fine, even though the word balloons are given to Bruce, which was a weird mistake there. Jean Paul calls Lil-Hee, who is shocked since she thought him dead, but then there's a little test, and yeah, it's really him. All parties converge in the Gotham Hotel, along with a chubby elevator repairman. Jerry is upset that the imposter lied, that Jean Paul was killed. Jerry says, slay them. Lil-Hee says, listen to me. And the fat repairman says, obey me, before being thrown out of a window 20 stories up. R.I.P. Batman.
Well, a few years early, but yes.
Azrael 75, Losses Part 3, Fallen Angel. And this was April 2001. Cover date, same creative team. Alas, Batman is not dead. But he Gabby Douglases his way back into the hotel and kicks the imposter, then knocks out Jerry, while Lil-Hee shoots Jean Paul and the imposter escapes. Lily tries to explain about the gunshot, that she wasn't aiming for him, whatever. Jerry is taken by police until the imposter rescues him, and Jean Paul and Bruce go to the cave to get Jean Paul patched up. not by Alfred this time. Leslie wants to see Jean-Paul, but he doesn't want to see her until he does what he needs to, which he's not sure what that is. Alone, Jean-Paul draws a mock-up of his new costume, think Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man, and he knows what he needs to do. Just don't tell Mom/Leslie. Elsewhere, the imposter and Jerry look at a map to see where to go find Lilhy. Jean-Paul gets his new costume and explains he needs to try to save the imposter. He puts on the new costume and feels different, though he doesn't know if it will trigger his abilities. Bruce wishes him luck and gives him car keys. On the way, Jean-Paul ignores a family who has totaled their car into a tree. He doesn't have time for that. He's got a mission. A bridge is down. He swims a river. No stairs. He climbs a mountain. He encounters Jeremiah in Azrael's clothing, but he is easily defeated. Lilhy is thrown off a cliff by the imposter, but Jean-Paul rescues her and climbs back up for a final confrontation. Jean-Paul does his best to talk to the imposter, but he sees no point to his life without the act of obedience. That's the imposter. They fight without masks, and the imposter falls dead. Lilhy is untied, and I have no idea where Jerry is. I actually looked a couple times. Jean-Paul leaves immediately to go help that family he passed before, and then he returns and spends the winter in the mountain alone. And that ends our prophet arc, I guess we could call it. Whew, boy. Okay. Let us actually talk about the covers first. And there is, I think it might be in the Cassandra one, but I hope that Carolyn noticed something on one of these covers that she'll talk about before. But yeah, so let's talk with 72. Yeah, general design, what you think about the cover. And they all kind of have the same like design elements. It's abstract to a certain degree. Does it give you a sense of what's going on? I mean, what do you think about these?
About me or Carolyn?
Either one. Go ahead.
I didn't mind the covers for like his 72 and 73. They reminded me. I remember during Bruce Wayne Murderer, there were a lot of comics or a lot of Bat books that were kind of had these kind of like puzzle piece covers. I remember specifically there's an issue of Birds of Prey that has a very similar cover, and I believe the final part of Bruce Wayne Fugitive has that. Like you'll see it eventually, but during like the Bruce Wayne Murder Fugitive storyline, there were like kind of puzzle pieces in the corners of the issues, and they kind of came together in the finale. So this kind of reminded me of that. I don't know what they're going for, particularly 73. Yeah, where you have like, did you know what Batman's brain looks like? And then Oracle looking like she's right out of Goosebumps or something. But it's not like stupid. I think it's eye catching. I recognize the art style. I can't name the artist without help, but 74 and 75's covers are standard. They're fine as artwork, but they're not that notable. But like I thought that like 72 and 73's covers were at the very least interesting, even though I didn't know what the schema was going for.
Carolyn, does this count as floating head? 73.
Well, I mean, the idea of the floating head was just that across 108 issues of Birds of Prey, you very often didn't have Barbara on the cover at all, even though, oh, he's mad I'm talking about Barbara? What?
He's had enough.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
No, my butt hurts, so I need a pillow for the chair.
Okay. So anyway, Barbara was often not on the cover at all. And then most of the time when she was on the cover, she was just a head. So in my book, I was making the argument that it seemed like they just didn't know, in contrast to the other birds always being full body. So I was making this argument that it seemed like the artists maybe didn't know how to deal with her in the chair. Like they knew how to draw women looking active or looking broke back and sexy, but they weren't really sure what to do with her in the chair. So very often she was like this floating head in the background. But technically he is that. I mean, he is by definition a floating head.
Yeah.
But not for the same reason, I think.
I do like how it's both Oracle as a human being and Oracle as her computer moniker, as you can see in 73. 73 is a bit more quizzical, like the different symbology or, just what is happening. Whereas 72, I feel like gets more to what the story is about with this, the imposter is behind him and it kind of seems like he's under control and you have this prophet. who is supposed to be ridding the world of evildoers, but it seems really sinister. But yeah, 73 is a bit of a puzzler. Was Batman at the computer? I don't know. I think Oracle is doing all of the legwork there. So yeah, that one's interesting. What about 74? Oh, pretty standard one.
Yeah, it's just Azrael.
Yeah. And who know? I assume it'd be the faux Azrael, right?
Which is a shame because that's probably my favorite Azrael costume. I always thought it was very distinctive and very striking. And none of Jean Paul's costumes after this I thought kind of like, because there's a shot where you see all of them to this point. And I kind of thought they were all sort of like pretenders to the throne.
Yeah. And then 75, because it is an oversized issue, 75 is a special number for, comics getting up there. Congratulations. We see sort of specters of his previous costumes and then a gravestone as well. Thoughts on this final cover?
Yeah, it lends credence to my theory because it says exercise climax.
Whoa!
I don't think
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
She comes out of nowhere with this stuff. Way back
when.
when.
All our archives are own.com.
I thought we were making this an extra special podcast.
Oh, so. That's true. But hey, I used to read a lot of Dick and Babs fan fiction on that particular site. You
told me in graphic detail.
I don't think it was graphic. I think I just shared with you what happened. Anywho, Batman shows up. That's just there you need to know. Okay, so I felt a bit like Professor Allen, who has at least once for me thrown me into his podcast, gives me an issue that's out of context, and he got it for 25 cents because that's his shtick. And then I read it and he has to say, like, is this worth 25 cents? And you're like floundering around like, I don't even know what was happening in there. I threw you into this. I apologize for that. But I mean, do you feel like it was a worthwhile story completely out of context? Did you enjoy it? Were you able to, I'm sorry that I didn't give you the background in advance, but were you able to kind of catch up and figure out what was going on? I mean, what did you think about this story?
Professors first.
Yeah, I liked it. I haven't read a lot of Azrael. I mean, just standalone Azrael. I just know him more from being in other titles. So I was fine reading it. I mean, I think Jeremiah was a little overdone with the crazy, but he could have been more subtle and still, I think, accomplish the same kind of thing, not just in text, but in art also. Really exaggerated, wild-eyed kind of look. But yeah, I thought, I mean, I like a story that has more than one Bat family person in it. And I did think the costume thing was kind of funny because it's like, okay, I mean, is it super duper different? And how are you swimming with those giant fists? I don't get it.
Yeah. They have like 4 fingers.
His hand, there's a panel where like his hand is the same size as his head, and Lily's breasts are like the same size as her head. And I'm like, this is telling me a lot about what they're trying to draw my attention to. Oh man. But yeah, worth it, sure.
Yeah, I never read Azrael in the pantheon of Bat books of the 90s. It just never struck me as something that was going to interest me. I read a lot of his stuff leading up to Nightfall and his kind of stuff. Like in Contagion, there's Azrael issues that are pertinent to that story that I read. And they never seemed like something I wanted to carry on because it's all about the Order of Saint Dumas and international adventures and stuff. And as an adult, I find more to take away from that. I don't think I'll ever not like Denny O'Neil. He's not a consistent writer, but I am consistently entertained by him more often than not. So I generally like whenever he writes anything Batman related or DC related. But so this story was fine. I completely agree, Carolyn, with Jeremiah Tompkins.
Yeah.
That like he was really OTT in the artwork, like to the point where like I was like, are they trying to go through some sort of like stereotypical ethnic signifiers with him? Because he looks like a biblical character and how he's like rendered with his teeth all messed up and like all gnashing and spitting and like his kind of evil is so archetypal of like religious zealots that you're very quickly going to roll your eyes at it because it's not, threatening or menacing. It's just like, okay, this feels like it's trying to be a lot more scary than it is, and it's just kind of like exhausting to read. And those kind of guys, you really want to see their nose broken by the hero before too long. And I think he got off easy. I think the idea of another Azrael is fascinating because Loving Nightfall, you see how much crap Jean-Paul goes through with the system and all that kind of stuff, and for him to observe that with another character is interesting. I was not paying much attention because I didn't know that the guy died at the end. Is that the grave that he's at in the final issue, or is that like somebody else?
Yeah.
You mean the faux Azrael?
Yeah.
Yeah, I assumed he was dead, and that was his gravestone.
Okay, I clearly wasn't visited. But I think.
I was just gonna say, our Azrael kind of looks like Gambit at the end of the last issue.
Mon ami. But I think what's going to attract both of yours, Stella and Carolyn's attention is like, Batman, does he trust so and so, and how does he get on with Oracle? And Oracle calls him boss in this story, like, which I'm more than happy to be audience to, and it's the more interesting part of this podcast. The story in itself as an actual story, I think it's fine. If not, I don't know if this would let me read the entire series, but it certainly wasn't awful. My takeaway was much more, with the Bruce and Barbara Jean-Paul stuff. And I will say, I actually genuinely enjoyed the Bruce and Jean-Paul interactions here because they have that history and because there's sort of that frayed tension between the two of them. I did like how that was depicted, but I'm sure that's not, there's more we can say to the story than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will. I mean, I second or third everything you said about the prophet. I mean, I think there's a reason why he's called that. It certainly is Old Testament style, talking about doom and all of this. And of course, the examples he had from the Bible were Old Testament. I liked the dichotomy between the two, or I guess juxtaposition between the faux Azrael and our Azrael, just because through that you could see how far Jean-Paul has come, just that he was this slave to the system and he fought and broke through it, and he's trying to save the imposter from that, but he just, like, there's no life without obedience. So I enjoyed that. What I missed, though, is the relationship between Jean-Paul and Oracle, which it bordered flirtatious, which I don't know if there was a change because now Barbara is basically dating Dick now, but it just seemed like there wasn't that usual joking between the two, even on that phone call. And really, I think the relationship that was focused upon was Bruce and Jean-Paul, which was done rather well. My only problem is, of course, when I was reading it and Bruce is getting the updates from Oracle, and, of course he leaps to, oh boy, the system's back online. And so, yes, I would ask, why would you not trust him initially? And so when I think even Denny O'Neil understood that was probably in the back of our minds, because at the end of Carolyn's second issue, right, you assume that, oh, there's going to lay into him, I want you. But then I have the plot twist where actually, no, he's got all this evidence. But the problem is he lays out all this evidence that this is clearly not you because it's not your MO, you work alone. But, trust never enters into that. And yeah, I did jokingly say trigger warning, and we could talk about it if you would like. I feel like it's the same thing with Huntress, gosh.
There it is.
I had to, there you go. Just, they give and give and give, and, there might be a slip up here and there, but he doesn't assume good intent. Do you want to talk about this? Do you think it was fine? Like, yeah, he didn't trust him, but then when he got the evidence, he was on board and 100% on board. I don't know. Carolyn, you're usually on my side. I know.
Yeah.
What would you like to say about this?
No, of course I'm on your side.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, it just seemed kind of typical that, he's the detective and he doesn't trust anybody. Poor lonely me with my giant family of people who love me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I thought that it made sense to me that the way it was put was, no, I have all evidence, I know he's not really guilty, because that, that ties in with his core personality. But yeah, I mean, just I maybe it was just the way that it was written could have been more subtle. Like for him to say out loud, okay, clearly that's it. He was in the same country as a bunch of people who died, and they died by a sword, so it had to be him. It's like, that's pretty bad detective work.
Worthy of Affleck.
Yeah, I also I thought it was an interesting counterpoint for him to come right out and say, although I feel like the art doesn't quite agree with it, because the way Bruce is drawn with kind of the black around his eyes, or inked, I guess. You know, he has the kind of the black, it makes him look really severe in most of the panels, where he's basically saying, he's talking about Leslie Tompkins, and he basically says, I love her.
Yeah.
But the way he looks is so like, oh, I love her. It's like, it's not, it could be a much more tender moment than it is. Because that is, you know, she has earned his respect a long time ago, and that's great.
Don, any thoughts? Azrael and Batman?
I think that like one of the really easy, you know, it's 11:30 at night. I gotta get the script in. What's a cliffhanger? What's a hook for the story ideas you can do for a general Batman story is this person's betrayed my trust, because like they did it in like Death of the Family way back when, and I never bought that as a genuine intention. Where like the Bat family is like, he betrayed us, I think, and like this, it's like he as a detective he's. I do understand on a character level. I showed mercy to Jean-Paul. I gave him sympathy to kind of carry on, and if he's gone evil, I feel responsible for that. I mean, it's cliche, but it makes sense. If he didn't feel that way, I would question it more. So while it's a bit waning on a reader's patience, it's not illogical. But I think that like the pressure's put on in a soap opera kind of way of like him going to Oracle, like, you know, oh no, it's Jean-Paul, grrr, and it's just, and like for all of it to lead up to this sort of like anti-climax of where you're fine. It does, you do feel a little half done, and that your time's a little bit wasted. I mean, it didn't piss me off, but like it was a bit of like, this feels very like, there are other things you can draw the reader's interest from. This didn't feel necessary to push on to the extent that you did. And maybe it is because of Cariello's artwork that has everybody looking crazy. So it's a little bit of a con, just in the kind of the delivery. Like there's one panel in 74 where Bruce is like half in shadow and stuff, and he looks very severe. And that's clearly the artist's style, but like it does affect the storytelling, and it affects your read of it, because this kind of crap does bring on the unending questions of, you know, trust and loyalty and who he values and why doesn't he ever value women and all that kind of stuff that like is completely fair and consistent, but it's really exhausting every single time we come across these kinds of stories, because it feels like we've been talking about this for like a millennia at this point. You smile.
There's, I mean, an easy answer to that. He just has to, you know, change a bit, you know, but I guess he never will.
He does until he doesn't. I mean, like, he changed in Infinite Crisis. He changed in after Bruce Wayne Fugitive, you know, until people want to write him, until Danny DeVito wants him to write it a different way. So, like, it's consistent until it isn't.
Agreed. And I meant to say this before when you were talking about the way, since you mentioned issue 74, and the way Jeremiah was drawn in kind of a bordering on ethnic stereotype is the nicest way I can put it, right? I mean, it has these Middle Eastern inflections to it. Also in 74, there's this guy, are they supposed to be in Hong Kong? Now I don't remember.
Yes.
Okay, so he kind of, he is talking to this guy, and I just felt like it was drawn in 1942. Do you know the page I'm talking about?
Yeah, he's all like his limbs are exaggerated, and he kind of has this sort of like skeletal nose, and like his teeth are all up. Yeah, big teeth, big eyes. And I thought, wow, I understand you're trying to show that he's afraid, but you have to kind of be aware of how certain populations have been depicted negatively in the past when you do that. So that, and especially when Jeremiah is in the panel with the guy from ostensibly Hong Kong,
it was a lot in one panel.
And you wonder if they feel, I don't think that they were like, I genuinely don't feel that they were aware of that, but like there's also an idea that like maybe we can get away with it because the faux Azrael is Asian and he's not depicted grossly stereotypically. So it's like, oh, it's a diversity of diverse people. And it's like, no, you're still relying on hackneyed old hoary stereotypes. Is it because I feel that like that kind of awareness had fits and starts of ending for a long, because I remember reading it was some Spider-Man comic where an Asian person was straight up colored yellow, and that was in the 90s. So it's like, I'm not surprised that it's this bad even up into 2001, just because I think the conversation wasn't as public as it would have been, as it is now.
Which is interesting. I mean, given our discussion on 7, 8, and 9, Donovan, how we were actually praising how both Cass and Shiva were drawn. So it's just interesting that it's not true across the, like it really depends on the book of how well different ethnicities are depicted.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, Damian Scott was much more observant of how to, or just a straight up better artist. Come down to that.
Yeah. Did you guys feel the loss of Leslie Tompkins in this particular arc? Because we really only see her once, I think, if that's true. I think when Batman visits her, but there's so much internal conflict with Jean-Paul because he doesn't want to go back to this violent lifestyle that he had before, and she is always in the back of her mind, but we never see her. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is that like a weakness to this particular arc? Does it really matter that she wasn't there and we only need his internal conflict?
Because of her appearances in No Man's Land, I was going to say that like I have, and I've read some other issues of Azrael where she shows up. I imagine that she would appear as consistently, where maybe the respite from this story doesn't impact potentially more appearances. But I think that's an interesting point.
I think you can always use more Leslie Tompkins because I think she tends to humanize Bruce more. And especially in, I mean, a lot of the books, this is true even today. If you pick up an issue of Batman, it might have no women in it. So she's one of the women in the Bat universe, and she's just this professional, helpful, smart person.
Yeah. With Oracle, you mentioned it a couple of times, Carolyn. I agree with you. I don't know if Don disagrees, but I agree that using the moniker the boss seems a bit off, as if he is no matter what. I can see him being, he's the leader of the Bat family, but I feel like at this point, she's almost like a solo agent who also doubles in the Bat agent, but she has, brought up her own mission, and she is well known throughout the DC universe. So I agree that calling him the boss seems a bit odd.
And more than once too. So it
yes.
wasn't just, I don't know. I guess, am I forgetting that used to happen a lot in other books?
Well, she hasn't been using that in Birds of Prey because he's been, annoying.
I was going to say that, like, I get that being a bugbear because she's so much of a solo character, but she did call him that a lot.
Did she?
I don't know if it's the first time that she has done it, but when I read that, I was like, I'm sure this is going to come up. At the same time, like, I remember this happening frequently. And maybe it was after this, but or maybe it's just O'Neill. But like, whether this happened or not, it's not something that's completely foreign to how she's been written or how she might be written later on.
Okay.
I could see it. Now I'll be on the lookout, frankly, but I could see it if in the typology, if they had like italicized it. So it was like, okay, boss. So there's a bit of like
Stop calling me that.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But I like Barbara as Oracle. I just feel like she has total ownership of who she is. And while she may work with Batman, I feel like he's not really the boss of her, which sounds like a child. You're not the boss of me. But honestly, she's working with the JLA. She's hacked into the government. She's taking funds from I just don't see it. But was this also where he was breaking into her security system? Or am I getting that mixed up with Batgirl? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So that was slightly comedic just because, she really likes to take pride in her security systems, and he happened to break both of them and makes the joke of like it was a bit difficult. So that was fun. But
we're nodding, listeners. We're nodding right now.
Oh
I'm not
yeah,
taking issue with the fact that he didn't at all.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, and in the previous, what was it, Nightwing that I did with Josh? He popped in too, like he was able to. So I don't know what's going on. I guess they just are that good that they can break through. But any other thoughts on this particular story?
I mean, I sounded like you guys were a lot more optimistic than I was anticipating because there is a lot of male angst. What did Harry call it? The masculine dementia in this that I thought it made for kind of an eye. I would imagine it would kind of make for an eye rolling comic book. But I guess it's just kind of typical of the times. I think it's fine. You know, it's not the best, but it's also not the worst. But it also has some problematic elements. So I think it's a little bit above average.
Yeah, I think on the angst, I'm not against male angst stories in isolation. The problem I have with them is I don't need 90% of my superhero stories to be that. You know, it's more the repetition of them and the lack of maybe exploring other stuff that could be explored that I have a problem with. But no, in individual stories, it's great. I mean, some of the best stories are those stories.
Yeah. And I think there's enough good stuff and good dimensions to this particular story to not wear you out on it. I'm being told my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully it comes back. Donovan fell down. But, you know, I think once you get past the first two issues and Bruce and Jean-Paul are actually in the same room, you actually see the loving Bruce that I really enjoy. And I felt like he was a brother or maybe a father, depending on how you see it. But just like he'll do whatever Jean-Paul needs. He's there to help him. He literally also patches him up. So I think there are some positive aspects to that as well. What would you give this out of 10 chubby repairmen?
7.
Wait. I just have to say that he has the bat suit on under the fat suit is so good.
I know.
So good.
That's one of my favorite weird things about Batman. Whenever, especially if he has to put a human mask over the cowl, I love that.
Man.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. We didn't even talk about that at all. I mean, I absolutely knew it had to be Batman because I thought, why is this comic right now focusing on this elevator repairman? But no, that was especially because everyone was going, listen to me, no, listen to me, and he's like, obey me. It was pretty ridiculous. But yeah, so grade out of 10 chubby repairmen.
7 fat Marios out of 10.
He did kind of look like Mario.
8.5, a solid B.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. I think I'm going to, I can't believe it, but agree with Donovan and give it a 7 out of 10 chubby repairmen. There are no listener emails. Remember, you can always write in to backrolltheoracle@gmail.com or tweet Carolyn. She won't respond at all. But we're going to take a break for the audio listeners and not for the video listeners, or watchers. When we come back, we will review Batgirl number 10 and 11. But first, Zaius' Radio Hour featuring Thanks for the Memories by Fall Out Boy, which